This Day is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
This show is supported by Macy's. Pumpkin spice lattes are here, and so is Macy's Star Deals Week. There are literally thousands of items 20 to 50% off. That includes 30% off denim, 40% off coats and jackets, plus 50% off bedding. All these savings add up to a season's worth of pumpkin spice. So treat yourself to one while you shop Macy's Star Deals Week from October 7th to the 13th. Shop now at Macys.com or in-store.
Hello and welcome to This Day, a history show from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avirgan. And this day we go to the campus of the University of Michigan, 1965, and the birth of the teach-in. Obviously, the middle of the 1960s, the civil rights movement, growing resistance to the war in Vietnam. It is a time of lots of protest and activism, but the teach-in was slightly different. Here were professors and students gathering often for a full day or more at a time to share lectures and lessons and engage in conversations and debate, all under the grand notion that the exchange of ideas can set the stage for action and change. Also, not for nothing, to get professors to teach for free and students to attend a lecture that they aren't required to attend is quite a feat on its own, so kudos to the teach-in organizers for that. But look, we are talking about the history of the teach-ins because it's very interesting, but also, well, because we are putting on a teach-in of our own. On Sunday, October 26th in Washington, D.C., we will all be there, right there on the National Mall from sunup to sundown in the spirit of the original teach-in, sharing lessons and stories and conversations in defense of the work of history and the role of museums, which is an issue that you listeners know matters a lot to us. And I will tell you a lot more about the details of our teach-in, but first let me introduce our crew here. Nicole Hemmer of Vanderbilt and Kelly Carter-Jackson of Wellesley, and also welcome back the great Nate DiMeo of the Memory Palace, fellow Radiotopia podcast, who was the first one who came to us with this idea of the teach-in. So here we are. It's a little bit of a sneak preview, but Nikki, Kelly, Nate, hello there.
Hello, Jody.
Hey
there.
Well, look, we want to do this as a proper This Day episode, so we will look at the history of the teach-in. But very briefly, Nate, you were the one, and I won't read people the text, but you texted me a few weeks ago and said, I have a weird idea. Where did this idea come from? And give us a taste of how it's all been coming together.
So, this is sort of rooted in two different epiphanies on two different cross-country trips taken in my younger days. The first was I was in my late 20s, and I was driving out to LA to move to LA, where I now live. I'm from Providence, Rhode Island, and the first stop on the trip was DC. I was hanging out with a friend. We were driving across country. We're like, hey, let's just really do it. Let's just spend the day. Let's go to all the museums. It's free. Let's see what we can see. And had one of those lovely day and it was DC days that turns into DC evening. And the feeling that I got was just that this is the Smithsonian is such a wonderful metaphor for America itself. It too has this sort of easily identifiable founding. It too has these periods where, this museum went up and this was the director, and you can kind of trace its story and its arc, but that the reality of it, the lived reality in the way that it, in the purpose that it serves, is done in the same way that the American story is sort of lived out. It's done by individual curators, partisans who want to tell this part of the story, who want to find a place, want to expand the reach of this particular museum, who want to shift, the story as that story is in motion. There's something so beautiful in the notion that here is this museum largely funded by the federal government that allows its people, the people who work within these museums, allows the people who contribute to those museums, to craft this sort of ongoing story of America and its history and, its scientific inquiry and all of that. And that history has, as it has, writ large, sort of always been contested and always been ever evolving and ever expanding. And it is, and also in this way that is very memory palace, in this way that I find very beautiful, also so chaotic. And so when I begin to like hear, this year about efforts to, to DEI this institution that has been built over the years, over and over again, with the mission of diversifying the story, of the thing, I felt outraged, in the same way that I, have with a lot of things. And in the same way, as I wear my sort of ice out of LA hat right now, and as I've found things to do, protecting my neighbors, here in my community, I was looking for a thing to do. It kind of reminded me the other epiphany on the other road trip, which was when I was at 19, I drove cross country, and my friend and I stopped and we realized that, we can go to these places for free. And so, but we got there at night and we walked around DC in the mall at night, and I simply didn't realize that you could. I didn't realize that it was a free space, that you could just cruise around and walk on the Lincoln Memorial and read the second inaugural and stand where Mahalia Jackson stood and look out, over the mall, that you could just walk and find a dark corner and make out, that you could that it was this that it was this public space in the center of this place that feels so walled off and in marble. And there was something in that real history, the people's history. And so I started to, in my outrage and my frustration, I kind of began to put those two things together. It's here I am, with a platform, a known dude in the history space. Here are friends of mine and colleagues of mine who are known people in the history of this, in the history space. We're the kind of people who should and can, make some noise around this issue. And then, how do you make some noise? You look to history. There are people who figured this out before. And some of the people who figured this out before were in Michigan in the mid 60s.
Yeah. And, when you reached out with this idea and you had the idea of a teach-in, I think I was really struck by that, as opposed to, say, a letter writing campaign or, a protest or whatever. And we'll talk a little bit about what the spirit of a teach-in means compared to some of these other things. But it has been coming together, and I want to lay in some of the details. But let's go from your two road trips and us in 2025 on the National Mall back to the campus of the University of Michigan in 1965, try and understand that spirit of how it all came together, and then we'll talk about how we're trying to capture it. But Kelly, like all good ideas, it kind of started with someone just walking around and thinking, hey, what can I do?
With the protest. All good things start with the protest. Started with a protest, University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, and a couple of faculty were thinking about how they could protest the Vietnam War, which was coming to a peak in 65, not quite yet peak, but there was reaching a fever pitch in terms of protest around it. And they wanted to actually do a one-day strike where they're like, what if we all got together and we said, okay, we're not going to teach on this day. We're going to walk out of our classrooms. And the government got wind of that, and they were not too happy about professors sort of neglecting their responsibilities and walking out on students who had paid their tuition to learn. And so they said, okay, well, why don't we go in the complete opposite direction? And instead of walking out of the classroom, we start a teach-in, and we basically get students to come together and talk about why the Vietnam War is so problematic and why we need to be in opposition to it. And so a professor, an anthropologist by the name of Marshall Solins, he says, and I want to quote him, he says, "They say we're neglecting our responsibilities as teachers. Let's show them how responsible we feel. Instead of teaching out, we'll teach in all night." And that's what they do. A bunch of professors, they get together, they meet up in an apartment to plan this one-day event. It's going to start March 24th of 1965, and they are going to teach literally from sunup to sundown.
I think from sundown to sunup.
In this case, sundown to sunup.
Oh, yeah, sundown
right?
to
overnight
sunup.
In this
Yes,
case.
It's more hardcore.
Yeah. All day.
Much, we briefly considered that. And then,
We decided we like daylight.
It's quite a feat. But yeah, they get about 3,500 students to show up to their first teach-in, and it's quite remarkable. They're doing, lectures and films and debates and having overnight discussions, and it really becomes like this wildfire that spreads across the country, and other campuses start wanting to do exactly the same thing, have a teach-in.
It's kind of remarkable because it has that feel of, I don't know if any of you had like those church lock-ins where you were locked into a gymnasium or something overnight, and it just has this like festive all-nighter slumber party feel to it. And then that is married up with, students who I think didn't necessarily have great outlets for their activism. And they're finding that in this, and they're finding support from the institutions that they're already mad at because they think these institutions aren't doing the right thing, but they're finding support from their professors, which also seems kind of cool.
And they're getting educated about it. I mean, a lot of people knew about the Vietnam War, but there's some people that are like, where's Vietnam? And for that, I think it's really powerful to be able to say, like, let's teach this in, let's educate the masses.
Yeah, there's also something really beautiful to me about the notion that each of these, like if you look at the sort of core group of those first professors, they really are mixed. Like they are all lefties. They all, felt betrayed by LBJ, this person they campaigned for, they thought would be, more anti-war than he, and not escalate. And suddenly, like he's escalating tremendously. And so they're all, politically aligned, but besides being from different disciplines, like they're really from different backgrounds. There's some who did civil rights work, and there are some who like kind of know what they're doing, like know what protest is all about. And there are others who simply like thought a lot about it, really thought about citizenship a lot. And there's something really beautiful about a group of people, together and finding a way to kind of take their skills and take their different experiences and, find an apparatus that will work for them. And there is something too about that notion that they were like, oh shit, we could strike. And then like, well, we'll probably lose our jobs. Like, Governor Romney will probably just say, hey, you guys are state employees, you can't strike. And Solomons, there's just something very powerful in that rhetorical trick, that notion that like, no, what if we just taught more? What if instead of like refusing to teach?
All of his fellow professors are like, wait a minute, I went from having a day off to now I have to lecture at 3:00 in the morning.
For free?
I mean, Nate, to your point also, just whenever you look at protest movements and civil actions, just the logistics too, the person who bakes some food, the person who gives up their apartment for a planning meeting, all those little details, all that little texture. I'm heartened as we bring our thing together, and I'm freaking out a little bit about the fact that it's just a few weeks away. This all came together in 1 week. So There you go. You can put this together. And obviously, it coalesces on the campus. 3,500 people, as Kelly said, attend. A couple other details of that day. First off, it was a very cold night by all accounts. And so maybe people were happy to have an excuse to be inside. But there were, over the course of the night, there were 3 different times where there were bomb threats called in. And it was mostly gathered in this one hall, Angle Hall. Everyone had to kind of like shuffle out when the bomb threat was called out into the cold night, wait for it to die down, get confirmed as a hoax, and then kind of go back in and continue the teach-in. But, it's pretty remarkable. Another really interesting detail is that women students had to receive special permission to be out that late. Campus rules at that time said that women could not be out in the middle of the night.
Wow.
So
one of the through lines of 1960s protest culture is that women were experiencing it and they were like, seems like we're operating under different rules. Maybe that idea of everybody's equal is not working out for us.
Yeah.
The next morning, the press has picked it up. The New York Times runs a headline called "Professors Hold Vietnam Protest." Now, to me, that's a pretty boring headline. I think you could come up with something a little, maybe professors pull an all-nighter, something like that. But nevertheless, I think it's the cover of the New York Times. I went back and looked at it. But it is getting some real press. And Nikki, it starts to spread pretty quick.
It spreads almost immediately. You're right that it gets this national attention, which makes sense because it's so many students. It's on such an enormous national topic and controversy. And they're tackling like really serious questions about what does your citizenship look like during wartime? Are you really a democracy if you don't have access to information about what the government is doing, which is going to be a big theme over the next decade? And even student protesters in groups like Students for a Democratic Society were talking about this as a kind of stroke of genius, because it takes what universities do well, which is teach, and marries it to the activism of the moment. Columbia University, basically the next day on March 26th, they hold an all-night teach-in. About 2,000 students show up. There's a sense, and one of the Columbia professors mentions this, he says that the students of the universities are coming out of a long sleep. And that's interesting because, I think that college students today have the reputation of being activists and kind of raucous. But at the time, college students were seen, correctly or incorrectly, as docile, as more focused on getting a job than engaging in world events. And here you are seeing a generation of students, particularly at these primarily white institutions, who are starting to engage more with the world around them. So you see the same thing happening over the next month at the University of Wisconsin, at Penn, at Swarthmore, at Temple, at Rutgers. 50 universities by the end of the spring term are holding teach-ins. By the end of the year, about 120 campuses had taken up the teach-in model as a way of doing activism on campus. So it spreads pretty quickly. And I think that's a sign of both how much hunger there was for it and how apt it was, right? How suited to a university it was.
Yeah.
We should also say that there's no surprise that Berkeley has the largest. 30,000 people show up at UC Berkeley for 36 hours during their teach-in.
And theirs, I think, is closer to festival than teaching. Jerry Rubin is up there.
Good time.
Phil Oakes is singing.
Dick Gregory is speaking. Phil Oakes. There's an improv group apparently. And so, I think that's one of the interesting things to think about is how does this intersect with and differ from all the other kinds of protests that we see in the era. No surprise the FBI starts monitoring them. They're calling them indoctrination sessions, making lists of attendees and so forth. But it really does spread.
Hello, this is Matt from the Explorers Podcast. I want to invite you to join me on the voyages and journeys of the most famous explorers in the history of the world. These are the thrilling and captivating stories of Magellan, Shackleton, Lewis and Clark, and so many other famous and not so famous adventurers from throughout history. Go to explorerspodcast.com or just look us up on your podcast app. That's the Explorers Podcast.
Fall is here, and with it comes cooler nights, heartier meals, and the craving for something warm and satisfying, which is where HelloFresh comes in, bringing you comforting, chef-designed recipes and fresh seasonal ingredients right to your door. I will tell you one thing about comfort cooking in the fall. I love it, but it can be really time and labor intensive. Lots of time in the oven, soups, baking. Sometimes I want to be able to make something quick and delicious and hearty on a weeknight, and that's where HelloFresh is stepping up. They recently doubled their number of recipes, their biggest menu refresh ever, and I've been exploring a lot of the options, including the pescatarian options. HelloFresh is helping me eat more fish. The other night, I made some herby salmon with red pepper cream sauce, and it comes with couscous, and you roast up some zucchini and onions. It took just about half an hour for it all to come together, totally doable on a weeknight, but also satisfying to cook it with your hands rather than ordering food or making something out of the freezer. The best way to cook just got better. Go to hellofresh.com/thisday10fm. You'll get 10 free meals and a free item for life, 1 per box with active subscription. Free meals applied as discount on first box. New subscribers only. Varies by plan. Once again, that's hellofresh.com/thisday10fm. You'll get 10 free meals and a free item for life. This day is brought to you by Uncommon Goods. Uncommon Goods makes holiday shopping stress-free and joyful with thousands of one-of-a-kind gifts that you can't find anywhere else. And the holidays, you know what? Are they here? Are they really here? Well, they certainly will be before you know it. So now is the time to head over to Uncommon Goods and snag a few things now before you get super stressed. That's what I did recently, where I found an at-home escape room kit for kids. You can create your own escape room adventure right at home. And yeah, that's one Christmas present for my daughter taken care of, checked off the list. The real issue is whether I have the willpower to put it in the closet and not break it out for the next couple months, because I'm very excited about that home escape room. Uncommon Goods has something for everyone, from moms and dads to kids and teens, book lovers, history buffs, diehard football fans to foodies, gardeners. You will find thousands of new gift ideas that you won't find anywhere else. So shop early, have fun, and cross some names off your list today. To get 15% off your next gift, go to uncommongoods.com/thisday. That's uncommongoods.com/thisday for 15% off. Don't miss out on this limited time offer. Uncommon Goods, we're all out of the ordinary. I actually want to get your thoughts on the bigger effort here. I mean, Nate, what is, as you see it, when compared to, say, a protest or compared to, media campaign or electoral politics, what is different about the teach-in specifically to you?
In this specific instance, I kind of like it because it gets to be all of those things. It gets to be a media event and it gets to be a protest in it. But if you listen to the Memory Palace, you know that I'm a little bit sort of like, my connection to the past is like what it can tell me about the present and or help order about, my own sort of existence. And so it's a little more wonder and beauty forward than education forward, And to me, like I find such beauty in the notion of just a simple like phrase that's almost like a tourist book phrase that the mall is like the nation's front yard, that this is a place where, not only does like Dr. King gathered, but like literally like gather people, literally anyone can sort of gather people. Mm-hmm. And when at a time when literally, not only are sort of like, jobs and livelihoods and like careers, being sort of like, cut out, at the knees of the people who are, who have made their lives like trying to, be stewards of like the American story. That simply like that there's like literally people are saying their stories you cannot tell, which is, the least American thing you can do. And so what's the most American thing you can do? To me, it's to simply tell the stories. And to do it publicly, that if one has come to DC, looking to kind of like, take their kids and commune, with some sort of sense of history, let's make sure that there's a place for at least a day, to make sure that we are not only telling stories that which is usually vague and absurd, but literally they don't want you to tell. Let's just do that because we can. And let's see where it goes. Between, Jerry Rubin, and Dick Gregory and, the protest that's, spur change, in Berkeley, is, a couple of literal married couple of academics who are like, you guys need a space. We have an apartment. And to me, this is like a small poetic action, that is simply something I wanted to see in the world and then see what happens when it gets in the world.
I also think our iconography of political activism and change is, it's a young student standing in front of a tank. It's students battling the police in Chicago. It's the March in Selma where you're facing down police dogs and sheriffs who are going to beat the shit out of you. And that is a critical form of protest and a critical form of change. But there are so many other ways to be an active part of change around you, right? And that it can be these more focused and intimate gatherings where you're coming to learn, where you're coming to understand and to be in community together, but you're not necessarily like inhaling smoke bombs, right? Like that there's a space for all of these different kinds of activism, and people come to activism and politics from a lot of different ways. And so this is a different way for people to come and be engaged and show that they want a a different future for the U.S.?
I mean, for me, I feel like history is a weapon. It's a way, it's a tool that you can use to do really wonderful things. You can build and correct. You can dismantle. You can do so much with history. And I think people routinely underestimate just how powerful narrative and story and culture and heritage are in terms of being able to shape our outlooks, our perspectives, our belief in the possible. History is able to do a lot of that work. It's not a cure-all by any means, but I always think that it's sort of like the ground zero, the place to start. Before you can go anywhere else, you have to know the history. You have to know what has happened before.
I think of it as a little bit like it's tilling the soil to then, take action or fight for change. But, you kind of have to be reminded of what you're in it for. And so I think of that, with our event, you need to refresh your ideas and your courage, and often kind of telling stories about the things you care about is a way to do that. And also, I mean, you look back at the original teach-ins, but we situated this 1965. I think we're right that it is a moment of growing dissent against the war, and the teach-ins created a space between I don't know anything about this issue to I'm going to go to a protest. They created that step in between, and I think a lot of people did rightly credit the original teach-ins with sort of creating the space in which people could start to ask questions. But the sort of context in which they were asking those questions was more academic than it was political or protest or whatever. And I think that that's important as well. So, I think that's part of our goal, is to just sort of create a space in which we can fill up the tank a little bit, in addition to sort of pointing out some of the things that are going on when it comes to the attacks on history and the attacks on museums and so forth. So one thing, much like what happened in 1965, we just started hitting the phones, talking to people. A lot of people have responded. Kelly, you've been the real engine here of hitting people up and getting people to attend.
I know. I feel like I need to turn people away. No.
No. Sun up to sundown is a long time. But the basic format is we're thinking of breaking this up into 30-minute chunks where people are going to give presentations or do readings or just lead conversations throughout the day, loosely around this theme of honoring the work of history and the role of museums. But Kelly, you want to name check a few of the people who've jumped on board, or anyone
Tracy
else?
McMillan Cottom, love her. I read all of her writing. Amanda Seals is going to be there. Derek Musgrove, who writes on Washington, D.C., is going to be there. Someone I'm really excited about seeing is David Blight, who is a professor at Yale, the author of Race and Reunion, among a slew of other books. He's going to be joining us, and I can't wait to hear from him.
He's been really out there talking a lot about the kind of this moment in history and the role of history right now. So yeah, and he came out of the woodwork, once we announced this. So it's really great, along with a lot of other people.
There's also going to be Martha Jones, who does incredible work on birthright citizenship, which I think folks know has been at the center of a lot of debate and attack in recent years. Nathan Connolly, who is just a powerhouse on racial capitalism. There's some really great people who are going to be there.
And Nate, you're going to do a couple readings throughout the day as well.
Yeah, for sure. And also, I think without naming names, essentially at this point, I also think we will be hearing from some people who have been directly affected, who have the jobs of telling stories within the buildings. I'm when it comes to the learning aspect, I am really looking forward to learning from them about their experience.
Totally. The logistics, I won't bore folks in audio. You can go find those at thisdaypod.com. But basically, we're going to be on the steps of the American History Museum. There's a nice terrace there where we think there's enough space for us to gather, break up into smaller groups if we need be. Sun up to sundown on Sunday, October 26th. A few people have pointed out to us that is also the day of the Marine Corps Marathon. We are going to chalk that up to a happy coincidence or maybe an interesting wrinkle as opposed to a big oversight on the calendar and scheduling on our part. But it should be fun. The Marine Corps Marathon is going to be running right nearby, and so it'll be a sort of, I think, really special day in DC.
Runners can get their Gatorade and then come to the teach-in.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Or if you want to bail at mile, I think I looked it up. If you want to bail at mile 19 and just
absolutely,
you can do that too. Yeah.
I think if you bailed in mile 19, you've done a great job. You should feel very proud of yourself.
You're still a winner. You're still a winner in our hearts.
Yes, right. So look, information is on at thisdaypod.com. It's on our Instagram pages, our newsletter as well, and we'll be spreading more information and updating as we get closer and closer to the day. Anything else you want to add about either 1965 or our little version here in 2025? I know I should say, the teaching has had a long legacy throughout. I mean, you can look back at the 90s and the 2000s and Black Lives Matter protests and so forth and see this sort of rich legacy that we're just trying to add in our very small way too.
Yeah. I'll add one more thing, and that is one of the through lines, both when Nate was talking at the beginning of the episode, but also through the teach-in later this month, is the importance of public space. It's something that we've lost a lot over recent decades, but public space is actually critically important to the work of democracy. And as we're thinking about the reconstruction of democracy in the years and decades to come, that reclaiming of public space has to be a key part of it.
Nate, final word.
I want to say, one thing that Nicole said really resonated with me, so as I have, been engaged in sort of trying to find out, what to do in these times, and I've, found kind of purchase in an avenue, around immigrant issues here in Los Angeles. It like on the one hand, the experiences that I have had that might be more photogenic, let's say, during this time, the things that have been the most personally impactful, both in terms of educating me around certain issues, but also in terms of like what Jody said and sort of just kind of filling the tanks, have been in these sort of quiet interactions and have been in the trainings and have been like stepping into my first training and seeing like so many different types of people, so many different, neighbors that I otherwise would not have had thought of, as an ally. That part of activism, when sort of merely like sort of forming community and listening, turns into figuring out how to speak up, is one of the most beautiful things.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, listeners, if you are from the DC area or know anyone from the DC area, we hope we see you on the 26th. And Nate, Nikki, Kelly, I will see all of you on the 26th in Washington, DC. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks, Jody.
See you guys.
My pleasure.
This Day is a proud member of Radiotopia, a network of independent, artist-produced podcasts. Don't forget to sign up for our America250 Watch newsletter. Every Thursday, members get exclusive access to analysis and information about the upcoming semi-quincentennial, commentary from our team, and a list of fascinating things that happened that week throughout history. Join in, find out lots more at thisdaypod.com. You can also follow This Day Pod on Instagram, Blue Sky, and YouTube. Jacob Feldman is our researcher. Brittany Brown is our editor. My name is Jody Avirgan. See you soon.
Radiotopia.